Good afternoon. Welcome to the October 12th, 2023 regular board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 2:04 p.m. and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territory of the Seashelt and Squamish First Nations. We have an amended agenda before us. Are there any additions to the agenda, further additions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Yes, Director Inkster, Director McMahon, all those in favor? Thank you. We have an amended agenda. The first order of business is, in fact, we're going to go in camera. So we would ask anybody in the gallery to leave the meeting with the knowledge that when we come back to open meeting, we'll have a 5-minute recess. So if you can watch the YouTube feed, we'll announce that we're returning, and we have returned, but then we'll announce a 5-minute recess to allow you to return to the Zoom gallery. So could I have a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91A, C, F, G, I, K, and 2B of the Community Charter? Director McMahon, Director Gabius, thank you. All those in favor? Okay, so we'll be moving in camera. Welcome back to the regular board meeting of October 12th, 2023. We are going to have a 5-minute recess, and then we will resume the meeting. So thank you. Welcome back to the October 12th, 2023 regular board meeting of the SCRD. We are now moving to item 2, is the regular board minute meetings of September 28th, 2023. Is there any errors or omissions in those minutes? No, seeing none, can I have a motion to accept the minutes presented? Director Toth and Director McMahon. All those in favor? Done. Any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? No, seeing none. We shall now, we have no presentations and delegations. So we'll move on to reports on the amended agenda. And I believe it's got to go to the amended agenda because we're going to do item 2A. And I got the wrong one up. Give me a sec. I'm lost again. Apologies. So it's GM Rosenboom, please. Oh.
Thank you, Chair. GM Rosenboom had to step out, so I am happy to provide an introduction to this late item. As you'll recall, the Sunshine Coast Regional District and Shechelle Nation jointly applied to the Disaster Mitigation Adjustment Fund for funding to support the construction of 2 reservoirs. One was the Lower Crown Reservoir and the other was the Waterline Reservoir. Subsequent to that, the Shechelle Nation approached the province of BC to see if they would consider providing expedited funding to support the Lower Crown Reservoir, which potentially could lead to the ability to move forward with that reservoir sooner. In a perfect world, if the province was to say yes to the funding soon enough, it could see construction start for Lower Crown Reservoir as early as the fall of 2023, with a potential operational start date being the summer of 2024. That was communicated to the local governments of the Sunshine Coast just prior to UBCM, and at UBCM we also mentioned our support to the province for their expedited funding request for Lower Crown Reservoir. Post UBCM, and probably less than 10 days ago, the nation were approached by the province, where the province let them know that they did have one funding program with an intake open for 2 more days that they could apply to for some of the funding for Lower Crown Reservoir specifically. They included, when they submitted that application, the original letters of support from the other local governments on the Sunshine Coast that accompanied the Disaster Mitigation Adjustment Fund application to the federal government. On October 3rd, we received an email from the nation requesting a new letter of support to support their application at the behest of the province to the Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation Funding Stream of the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund. So the purpose of this report is to see if you are prepared to provide a letter of support to that fund. And we also included just some of the implications that we will be required to consider and that we will be working with the nation on in terms of how we would potentially operationalize this if the funding was able to be secured. I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you. It's quite a complete report in very short order. It's pretty good. Directors, yes. Director Toth, please.
Thank you, Chair. Generally supportive of carrying on with this, with looking for grant funding for this project, because it's a big cost for us to try and bear on our own as a community. Looking at page 9B, there's a list of items here that have been identified by staff as things that we would need to sort out And I know that some of them probably have a different timeline than others might. But we still have a lot of questions that are unanswered going forward. And so I'm wondering when we might start to see some of these questions getting answered. Thank you.
CAO?
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. Some of these questions we have already started to try to look at the answers for with our counterparts from Shoshell Nation and their consultants. Some are conversations that have yet to occur, and this probably isn't an exhaustive list. This is a list. There's things that would be missing on this list. It's just to point out that, and as we've talked about in previous discussions of these reservoirs, there's a lot of things that we need to cover off as we work towards the potential to do these projects together. This is a few of them, and we just thought it was of value to bring them to your attention, as because the funding has not been announced by the federal government, and it's highly unlikely that that funding would be announced anytime soon, and we have yet to receive any confirmation from the province that they are prepared to provide funding at this time. The longer that it takes for funding confirmation to be received, the shorter the window of time we will have to operationalize those implications. And we've got another water summit coming up. We've got our strategic plan completion coming up, and we've got budget proposals for 2024 coming up. And right now, none of those things, like no budget proposals and no work plans, include all of the work required to have Lower Crown Reservoir online in the spring of 2024. And depending on when the province provides confirmation of funding or not, we may have a very short window of time to scramble together the necessary budget proposals or make the necessary adjustments in what you've approved in the existing work plans to respond to it.
Thank you. Director Toth, I see your hand up. Oh, okay. Director McMahon, please.
Okay, many questions, but let us, this is, I mean, it's a good project. I think everybody has wanted for a long time to make use of a big hole in the ground that otherwise isn't doing anything. But I have to say this is a very ambitious timeline. Even if we had magic scissors that could cut through all of the approvals required to actually build this and commission it before next summer, seems highly ambitious. Did staff want to comment on that at all?
A little bit of speculation, but
Yeah, it would
CAO McKinley?
Yeah, recognizing that there would be a high degree of error in these upcoming guesses, but yes, it would be highly ambitious. Just putting the application together took several staff from several departments almost a month of time, and that was working closely with consultants and staff from Shoshell Nation, and collaborating with others. I think it would be very challenging if we had approval, if approval was announced while I was speaking into this microphone. It would be incredibly challenging to have the resources in place and mobilized for us to be able to have that reservoir operational next spring. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it would completely change, it would require us to completely change many of the projects that you've already approved us to be working on. There would be a huge realignment of existing resources and probably some budget proposals for additional resources dedicated to this project that would need to come forward. So would it be impossible? No. Would it be a huge challenge? Absolutely. And would it have other significant work plan applications on other water projects? Absolutely.
Thank you. Let me just catch up. My screen is different than what was on the wall. Director Bax, you had your hand up. Did you get your question answered, or?
Not exactly. So you're talking about, in the report, it says that it's going to take more than 2 FTE. Now, when we're talking about this type of thing, we're going to be working within our organization on the administrative parts of this project, getting approvals, et cetera. And the actual, and we're going to be contracting out the work for the lining of the reservoir and the piping section to the treatment plant, et cetera. Is that so, or are we building the infrastructure ourselves? I don't think that's something we do, is it?
Through the chair, my understanding is that the project would be the nation's project as far as the works that Director Bax just described. However, as CAO McKinley pointed out, there's a significant portion of the works that would have to be looked at independently through our resources to ensure that if we're operating this reservoir, that it's built to standard, as well as it has the capability to be integrated with our own system. So that's where the resources primarily would be for the SCRD, is how does it integrate into our system and the works required for that.
So the nation would create the infrastructure to bring the water to our treatment plant, and then we would integrate it into our system.
I wouldn't go that far to say there's a delineation there. There will be obviously some overlap between our works and theirs, and as CL McKinley said, there's a lot of these questions that have not yet been answered.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Director Toth, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if the CAO or the acting GM are able to speak to what implications might be for the project if we're approved for this smaller ask from the province, but if we end up getting denied by the feds, if we do get approved by the province, is this region committed to a $100 million expense, whether it's funded by the feds or not? Thanks.
Yes, CAO McKinley, please.
Through the chair, yes, thank you for the question. I think at this point, the discussions to date have been that the joint application of the Disaster Mitigation Adjustment Fund is, what we've said is we are collaboratively working towards that. We are happy to try to solve all of the issues that may resolve should that funding application be successful, either for all or part. Similar to if the federal government said no through the DMAF application, but the province said yes to the Lower Crown application, we would proceed differently. If the province said no to the large ask to the Lower Crown application, the Fed said no to all of it, but they got a small portion of it funded through this side application to this Hail Mary grant program. That would, all of those different scenarios would require us to regroup and try to figure out how do we move forward based on these new facts. What we have committed to is jointly and collaboratively continuing to work together until we know if we've got something we can do.
Yes, I believe that helps. Director Stamford, please.
Thank you, Chair. So many questions. Can someone remind us again how much water this Lower Crown reservoir is supposed to be able to add to our supply, and how does that compare with some of the other initiatives that we are already in line to bring on over the next couple of years?
CAO McKinley, do you have those?
I'll take a stab at it, and this is where I get to have fun trying to answer subject matter expert questions from the CAO's chair. The Lower Crown Reservoir is proposed to approximately be 780,000 cubic meters. How does that relate to others? Well, the Waterline Reservoir is about 2.1 million cubic meters. And how does that relate to siphons? Well, siphons provide 2 million cubic meters of water per year. That's what we currently have a limited amount of extended permission to continue to use. So I think the 780,000 cubic meters, I can't remember how many days of water that is at stage 3, but it's probably about 32 additional days of water at stage 3. It's about 1.5 church roads, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad I didn't have to take a cut at that. Director McMahon, please.
So normally when we get involved in large capital projects, that involves borrowing, and then that requires taxpayer approval. But this process, it appears that at no point would it require taxpayer approval. Am I getting that correct?
If the grant applications, the suite of them in some combination was successful to cover the whole of the capital costs involved in one or both reservoirs, because by teaming up with Shishel Nation, it's 100% capital funding. That would mean that there wouldn't be capital funding implications on the ratepayers. However, there would be significant operational funding implications. As we already know, the cost of, say, bringing water from Chapman Lake to the water treatment plant is a lot less per cubic meter than running, whatever the horsepower pumps are at Church Road. So while it's very appealing from the capital cost standpoint, whenever you can get something at 100% off on its purchase price, that's fantastic. But there's a big difference between a gravity-fed system and a uphill pumping system. So the operational costs would be higher, but the capital costs, if successful, would not be borne by the ratepayers.
A follow-up, please.
Yes, and so when we're talking about operational costs, we would presumably be talking about things like additional staff to operate the system.
Correct. Additional staff, electricity, the repairs, of course, the asset management costs, additional chemicals, whatever the other implications are to the upgrades required at the treatment plant, et cetera, et cetera. But for now, the upgrades to the treatment plant related to the reservoirs are included in the applications, the capital side.
Thank you. Director Gabius.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have an approximate cost to the Lower Crown Reservoir project?
CAO McKinley, please.
I'm going to hedge this again by saying this is an approximate budget of between $20 and $30 million on the capital side for Lower Crown.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if this provincial funding came through, which is $5 million, correct? This is what I heard, correct? This is $5 million?
Again, that's approximate.
Approximate. And the project starts, and then the federal funding does not come through. That would mean we have to readjust and find alternate funding, correct?
I think the easiest way to answer that is if any combination of funding gets approved, either federally or provincially, all from the side ask or in combination this provincial grant ask plus the additional funding on the side. If all of that came through, there wouldn't be a need to go back for any kind of AAP or referendum to fund these capital costs. If the federal funding or any combination of the provincial funding isn't approved, we have to go back to the drawing board to figure out what the implications of that are and whether or not we would be coming forward with an AAP or a referendum to fund one or both projects at that point. Until we hear back on confirmation of funding, we simply don't know what the next steps are, other than knowing we have a lot more work to do.
Thank you. Director McMahon?
My, how interesting. So the provincial money, let's just say the province says, yes, yes, do this, but we haven't yet heard from the federal funders. At some point, a decision must be made whether to go or no go. Who makes that decision?
CAO McKinley, please.
The scenario that is sort of the way it's unfolding right now, we're waiting to hear from the feds. What the nation has done on the side to try to expedite this is essentially said, hey, province, we would be prepared to sever Lower Crown from the federal application if you're prepared to fund the Lower Crown Reservoir, because it's several years ahead of Waterline anyway in terms of project readiness. So what they've essentially done is they're trying to see if the province would fund Lower Crown in full, thereby making almost two completely separate projects. One that's been funded by the provincial government, that's ready to be operationalized as soon as can be expedited, and the other, we would be waiting to hear the results of the federal funding program and would have to make decisions based on whether or not they were prepared to fund Waterline Reservoir, the larger one, a project that likely isn't ready to really come on stream for 4 or 5 years.
Thank you. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. I think that generated another question for me, but I'm going to hold off and see if I can sort through the answer here. The $5 million that we're looking for from the province, I say we, it's the collective, we as we work through this water project. Is it intended that that's to be used for external consultants, external engineering, external work? Or are we able to use any portion of that grant, if we receive it, to fund our staff cost? If we talk about having to refocus potentially the entire, infrastructure services division to work on this, are we going to be able to capture some of that cost with this grant funding, especially if we're unsuccessful with the bigger grant? Thank you.
CAO, please.
It's probably difficult to answer that completely accurately. However, I think essentially what the province has said is we appreciate your request, and I'm just going to use a $30 million total. It might not be quite right. What they're saying is you could ask for this portion of that $30 million through this fund. So I would imagine that whatever's been requested to this fund would simply be X amount of dollars worth of scope from the larger ask, which would include all eligible costs that we could be reimbursed for in terms of our portion of that project. How much of our staff time that includes, I actually couldn't say. I'd have to comb through all the eligibility guidelines.
But essentially, if they're working on the project, it could be capitalized if the project goes ahead, theoretically.
Theoretically.
Yes.
And likely to a significant degree of eligible costs. Yes.
Yeah.
But I couldn't speak to the total.
Yes, Director Toth, follow up, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's less a question than a comment. You mentioned that, if the project goes ahead, those staff costs could be capitalized. I'm more thinking about what happens to those staff costs if the project doesn't go ahead. Have we potentially delayed all of our other projects? Are we out of pocket for, several staff members' work for quite some time without any ability to recapture out of this smaller grant? That's what I was getting at.
Yes, I believe that's true, but CAO, could you?
I think it would be fair to say that until we've heard confirmation of funding, there will not be a tremendous amount of ineligible costs incurred. We are going to continue to do the work that we can to prepare ourselves for what I'm hoping is a successful grant application. But until we have notification of approval, we won't have to incur a lot of these costs in terms of staff time and/or financial costs.
Thank you. That helps. Director McMahon?
I had some questions about the associated upgrades to the water treatment plant. So if I understand this project correctly, the idea is to capture water in the winter from the creek and then to use it during the summer, either to be pumped raw water back into the creek as needed or to go to the water treatment plant. So obviously the water treatment plant would have to be hooked up to the new intake, I guess. But I thought there might be some suggestion that the capacity of the plant was going to be increased. And I was a little puzzled about that because we rarely go near the maximum capacity of the plant, even in summer. And a lot of the conservation measures we're taking are lowering the average usage. So is it envisioned to expand the plant capacity, and if so, why?
Thank you for the question through the chair. And again, this is going to be a higher level response. If Lower Crown is approved, that doesn't necessitate a lot of changes to the water treatment plant. In fact, a lot of the challenges we're having now at the water treatment plant are around getting it to run at lower volumes because we're actually introducing so much more water into the system. However, if Waterline is approved and moves forward, that will require substantial upgrades to the water treatment plant, and those upgrades have been submitted as that part of the Disaster Mitigation Adjustment Fund. I can't remember the exact amount, but I'm going to say in the order of magnitude of $15 million-ish. I can't remember the amount right now. So those have been included as part of that application at 100% funding eligibility. However, if Waterline came online, there would be additional operational capital asset implications over time. But Lower Crown itself doesn't require dramatic changes up at water treatment plant.
Thank you. Director Stanford?
Yeah, I think we can keep going through questions for hours. But I'm hoping that when we're looking at this letter of support, that there is the ability to nuance some of the big gaps in unknowables that we have right now. That this can be encapsulated with an outline of how much we're still not sure of the implications of this project. And I also want to really emphasize that conservation is a big part of our strategy moving forward, and that has to be part of this overall review, or view when we talk about a letter of support.
Yes, any comments on that?
I think it would be pretty easy to articulate to the province that as we await their decision, a tremendous amount of really important work cannot be done. And the timeliness of their approval will allow us to start bridging the gap between where we are and where we need to get very quickly once they've provided it.
Okay. I won't comment further. Director McMahon, please.
Timelines, again, always fun. While the idea of having this ready for next summer is wonderful, I hope that the grant does not require the project to be finished by next summer. All right, so if timelines slip, they slip. Not that that ever happens.
Could you comment on that, just so everybody could hear?
Yes, the grant wouldn't be dependent on the reservoir being completed and operational next summer, but if they said yes fast enough, it might be at least possible if we're prepared to give it the level of priority that would require.
Thank you. Director Stamford, I see your hand up. Is that, yes? Okay, I think we could ask questions forever, but that'll work themselves out. Would someone like to make a motion on the recommendations on page 9A? Yes, Director Bax?
I move we adopt the recommendations as they appear on page 9.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Director Gabius, any further discussions? No, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. So, we're now moving on to Committee of the Whole recommendations. It's item number 3, Committee of the Whole recommendations number 1 to 4 and 6 to 8 of September 28th, 2023, as recommendation number 5 has previously been adopted. Annex B, pages 10 to 13. Before we adopt the recommendations, would directors like to pull any out? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the recommendations? Yes, Director Toth and Director McMahon, thank you. And no further discussions, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? No, that passes. Now we will go to 3A of the amended agenda. And it's on page 13A. Yes, motion to adopt the recommendations. Director Toss, seconded by Director McMahon. Any further discussions? No, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. We're now on to item 4, which is a request for proposal 2222001 Chapman Creek Tower Replacement Contract Award. Who is going to speak to that? GM Hall? Thank you. That's Annex C, pages 14, 15, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give some brief context, and then we have Fire Chief for Special Projects, Bill Higgs, here as a resource to the board as well. This report recommends a project budget amendment and contract award for one of the key towers in our 911 system. As noted in the project, as noted in the report, this one has taken some time to get to this stage, but staff are excited to move it forward. And if there are any technical questions where more information is helpful to the board to make a decision, as I said, Chief Higgs is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is something that we need to proceed with. It's unfortunate to see how far inflation has come in 7 years when we look at the project cost, but I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 14 as they're presented.
Thank you. I see that seconded by Director McMahon. Any further discussions? No. I shall call the questions. All those in favor? Any opposed? No? That passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen, for being so patient. Okay, so we're now moving on to item number 5, Annex D, pages 16 to 18, modification of terms, Hillside Water Head Lease number 235700. General Manager, Planning and Development. Please.
Thank you, Chair. So staff have been working following board direction on the development of an application for renewal of the water lot head lease at Hillside Industrial Park. And in discussion with the province, they recommend that a modification of the term be completed to provide us time and space to do the steps necessary to create the application package, including working with First Nations. And this is preferable as the alternative is month-to-month tenancy and administration. So this benefits not only SCRD, but also our sublease tenants at the park.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Director McMahon?
Yes, this is a absolutely sensible measure. So I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 16.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Yes, Director Toth. Any further discussions? Seeing none, I shall call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. Okay, so that takes us to item number 6, which is Microsoft licensing 2023 contract amendments. Manager Information Technology. Who was going to introduce that for us? Oh, yes, please go ahead, David.
Thank you, Chair. This report seeks approval for $14,418 spent over the board's resolution of March 9, 2023 for a contract for provision of the 2023 Software as a Service standard licensing for Microsoft 365. The licensing was provisioned through Online Business Systems, the awarded reseller, for the quoted value of $118,677, excluding GST, for the standard softwares that include Microsoft Windows, Outlook, email and calendaring, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, Microsoft Teams, and SharePoint. Since then, unanticipated staff expansion needs and some specialized Microsoft 365 licensing for drawing and project planning purposes, which attracted additional fees, have resulted in this overage. This report seeks approval for a further $4,614 for contingency for similar purchases that may be required between now and until the contract expires in February of 2024.
Yes, that seems pretty straightforward. Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Is there any questions? No? Would someone like to make a motion then for me? Yes, Director Toth. Motion to accept the recommendations on page 19. Is there a seconder for that? Yes, Director Stamford. All those in favor? Any opposed? No, that passes. Thank you very much. We have no communications, no motions, no bylaws. We're on to directors' reports. I was just going to start from that end and work to this end. So Director Toth, please.
Thank you, Chair. District of Sechelt is having an open house right now for the new Public Works and Operations Center on Dusty Road. It's going till 4 o'clock, so if we all keep our reports short, we might actually be able to make it there. Beyond that, nothing much to report for the moment. We are doing an audio-visual upgrade of the council chambers. So this last week, we actually had to have our committee of the whole meeting at the Water Resource Center, which was a interesting temporary setup because we couldn't use our meeting room. But yeah, looking forward to the new technology and the increased accessibility and hopefully performance of our meetings for the online attendance. So I'm just going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you for that report.
I am
Bax, please.
joining Directors Stanford and Directors McMahon at the Howe Sound Community Forum in Squamish tomorrow. Sorry? Oh, it's in Whistler, but it's the Howe Sound Community Forum at the Squamish Lillooet Cultural Center in Whistler tomorrow. And on Saturday, the Roberts Creek Volunteer Fire Department is having their open house between 10 and 2. And I would plan to attend that. I will be joining, I'll be liaising with the senior planning table next week, as well as hoping to get to the public hearing on bylaw 7226. Besides that, nothing else to report.
Thank you. Director McMahon, please.
Yes. Let's see, on October 5th, I attended the Metro Vancouver Indigenous Relations Committee meeting via Zoom. We are an observer. We have observer status on that committee. Metro Vancouver is preparing videos, including they are making one about archaeology for the use of staff and contractors. That actually sounds like a great resource, and perhaps when they are finished with it, we could make use of it ourselves, borrow it from them. We also had a guest from the federal government there, and I learned many, many, many more acronyms than I had ever dreamed of, and I also learned about the non-derogation clause in the Federal Interpretation Act. You can look that up. On October the 6th, I was at the meeting with Scredo and funders. It was a good discussion, and I think the Scredo's new board is moving forward in some good directions. I also attended the provincial wildfire and drought update for mayors and chairs. Thanks for the invite. And it included an update from the River Forecast Center, noting that there are long-term rainfall deficits all across the province, well, across most of the province, and they expect these challenges to continue, certainly next year and maybe for some years to come. It was very interesting hearing questions from the assembled about some of the challenges that are still happening across the province, especially in the Northeast, where they've been hit very hard. I appreciate that the province has held these briefings. They're very helpful. And I think, you know, since COVID, the access to provincial briefings for local governments has really improved considerably. And the quality of these briefings has improved a lot. Also during COVID, we started getting briefings from Vancouver Coastal Health, which was a first. That was like a record. So yes, I am also going to the How Sound Forum, and thanks to the wonders of Zoom, I will be attending another meeting as well at the same time. Thank you.
Yes, we can do more work still. I'll just take my turn seeing I'm online here. It's going to be short. I must say I quite appreciated the drought update and hearing what's happening in other parts of the province. And it usually was, in previous years, just us. So I wouldn't say misery likes company, but it's good to see that it's not a new norm. It's an evolving norm. They made it quite clear that they anticipate it not getting better and not plateauing. We have to expect it to be the same or worse in the future. And I think we have to take that to heart. The other item is that my residents association is having a town hall meeting on Sunday, October 22nd. And those are usually quite lively, so if anybody is coming to have something to do, drop into the community hall in Madeira Park. And that's my report. Thank you. So Director Gabius, please.
Thank you, Chair. Not too much to report on, getting back in the swing of things after UBCM, digesting everything that saw and learned there. But I did also attend the update on wildfire and drought with Ministers Kang and Ma yesterday. And yeah, no denying that climate change has had a massive impact on the province this year especially. And just some, you know, really shocking numbers that I can share. The BC 10-year average for forest fires is 1,425 fires per season, and usually it's about 436,000 hectares burnt. And this year it was 2,227 fires with 2.85 million hectares burnt so far, and it's still burning in some parts. So things are getting better, but definitely the province took a hard hit this year. And I agree that these briefings were absolutely helpful. Really interesting to see what's happening in other parts of the province. And yeah, that we're not the only ones this year. And another thing that really stood out to me is Minister Cullen that said that mitigation is all about carbon and adaptation is all about water. So water, water, water. It's going to be very top of mind. And I am from Half Moon Bay. Half Moon Bay is awesome, and it's full of really talented, dedicated, and wonderful residents, including the past and current presidents of the Elder College, of the board of the Elder College. So I am very excited to invite all of you, if you haven't registered yet. There will be a free all-ages event on Saturday, October 28th from 2 to 4 at Chatlich High School. It is on the topic of Indigenous law and conversations across generations, and it is presented by Dr. Val Napoleon, Law Foundation Chair of Indigenous Justice and Governance at UVic. So I hope you can all make it. It's free, but you have to register online on the Elder College website. So I hope you can all join me there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's quite clear. And lots. Yes, Director Stamford, please.
I'm looking forward to attending the Safety Blitz next week at the Langdale Elementary School. That'll be next Wednesday afternoon. And part of that will be to draw attention to the ongoing issues around the S-curve at the YMCA Road access off Port Mellon Highway. There's good interest in the local community in coming out here to the public hearing on the subdivision proposal next Tuesday evening. That's the subdivision proposal for Stella Maris Road. I just lost my... And if anyone notices some work going on Marine Drive, there's apparently Fortis will be moving their gas line this week in preparation for further drainage work in the Elphinstone Avenue, Grantham's Landing area to prepare for the winter. This looks like it's mainly going to be temporary fixes, but any kind of adjustments in this area is much appreciated. From the islands, Gambier Islanders will be seeing their mail service adjusted next week when the 3 post box locations are amalgamated into one at New Brighton. I'm always happy to educate people about what goes on in the islands. Islanders get mail 3 times a week, and although this reduction in service is a concern for community members, to put it in perspective, Gambier Southwest Peninsula actually gets service, unlike the rest of Gambier or Keats that get no mail delivery whatsoever. And finally, I would just like to acknowledge the passing of a local community member, Joe Wright. Joe was very active in the local island communities as a member of the Gambier Fire Group and the wider region. He was a member of the Gibson's Landing Harbor Authority, chair of the Route 13 Ferry Advisory Commission, and a member of the SCRD Ports Monitoring Advisory Committee. Joe was a representative of a no-nonsense, get-it-done community generation who pushed things along despite, not because, of local government bureaucracy. And those are his words. Thank you.
So someone that's a long time serving volunteer. Good for him. Thank you very much, directors. I learn a lot during the director's reports. I know it's a little bit onerous at the end of the day, but I must say I do enjoy it. Yes, Director Gabius.
Well, we forgot to talk about the wonderful demonstration that we had at lunchtime by Cedric, who has built a prototype for a bike-towed street sweeper, which is so amazing. So I don't know, Director McMahon, if you know if there's anywhere online people can have a look at this wonderful invention, But I thought it was amazing, and I want to thank Cedric for coming to show us.
Yes, it was awesome that we got a demonstration that sure can sweep a lot faster than by hand, I'll tell you that. And it did a nice job. Let's hope that it gets into production. Be great. Very human-powered, quite green. Yes, Director McMahon?
There's even a website for it. It's bikelanesweeper, all one word, .com.
Thank you. We have no new business. Questions from, we adjourn first and then we ask questions. Okay, motion to adjourn. Director Toth, seconded by Director McMahon. All those in favor? Yes. Is there any, there's no one in the audience here. Would anybody in the virtual room like to ask a question? If you'd like to, just put up your hand and we can promote you. No, don't see any hands up. Okay, thanks everybody. And it was a long day, but we got a lot done. That was good. Thank you.